the damage.
That's
done.
used, baby. Used and abused.
And this guy that did a several minute straight burnout for fraud because he didn't want the car anymore, bent the wheel hitting the curb. We're going to talk about all this right now. So this video was inspired by one of the subscribers, and Wolo. He sent me a message and said, hey, why don't you do a video and explain the difference between used and abused? And I think that's a very good topic because so many people have controversial issues over this. How about that famous quote from Carroll Shelby, who says the cars are meant to be driven and they're not meant to just be cleaned up and looked at? I agree with Carroll Shelby on this, but what I don't agree with is when there's a car that's neglected, such as this '03 Cobra that was sitting in the weeds, and people say, what's your problem with that? It's meant to be driven. These cars are meant to be used. Now, they are meant to be used, but they're not meant to be abused. Like in the case of my buddy's '03 Cobra, this car was used really well, it was raced and everything was fine, and you might say it was abused because he ruined the engine on it. We had to pull it out. This is a clip from my brother's channel where he had pulled the engine out because he had melted a piston. Now, that wasn't abuse in my opinion. That was something that just happened along the way. So I think there's a little bit of middle ground on each of these. So how about not used? Let's talk about not used. Here's an '03 Cobra, 10th anniversary. This car had 5 miles on it. This car was preserved, and I believe this one was actually taken and driven later, but for most of its life it was not used. You could see it still had all the plastic on the seats. I did a full story about this car, and from what I understand, this car was purchased and somebody did actually start driving it. But this '03 Cobra, same thing, 10th anniversary, 5 miles on the car, totally preserved, still had the plastic on it. This car is still in a private collection and it has not been driven. Now, do I agree that this car has missed out on part of its life because it hasn't been driven? Partially. I agree that it is unfortunate that this car has not been used, but I also like to see a prime example of a brand new Terminator Cobra. Now, the controversy here is people get really upset and they say, this guy never enjoyed this car. Well, look right next to it. What do you see? A silver one. And next to that one, a black one. This guy owned several of these, and he did drive them. The silver one had like 5,000 miles on it. The black one, I believe, had 10,000 miles on it. So even though he wasn't enjoying this specific car, this man did not miss out on the experience of owning a Terminator Cobra because he was able to drive the other two. And that silver one was also a 10th anniversary. So I also feel like I have a little bit of experience with that because I own several Mustangs, and a few of them do not get driven very much, sometimes less than a couple hundred miles a year. But to me, I always recognize the fact that I am worth every mile that I put on these cars. And if I ever feel like these cars are sitting too much and that I'm not enjoying them enough, I take them out and I drive them. And it is good to drive the cars around and keep the oils moving in them, keep the seals good, of course. So I go out and I have fun with mine. So in the case of a 0-mile car, basically, I do agree that it's okay for being a piece of history. I think it's okay for being a showpiece and a museum piece at that point. And I think that as long as you have another one to enjoy, you're not missing out. Now, this car, for example, has been talked about a lot. I hear a lot of negative comments about this car. People say that car is ruined, the seals are all dried up, it's not going to run right. But the truth is, this is now a museum piece. This is a collectible Hot Wheels car. It is not to be driven. Nobody will drive this car. And so why don't you just forget about that aspect of the car? Because yeah, it is going to have problems. I've seen cars like this with no miles on them that sit, and all of a sudden you go out to the car and there's a puddle of brake fluid on the ground because the rubber hoses and everything have dried, they've cracked, and then they just start dripping oil and leaking. And that's okay. For this car, that's okay. This car will never be a driver car. It's always going to be a high value, high dollar, collectible piece of history, just the way it left Ford. Now, several of these cars were totaled within a week after they left the showroom floor. Those cars are long gone, okay? So I think people should respect this car more than one that somebody took and destroyed and it's absolutely gone, never to be seen again. Now, at the time, the owner who owned this car did do a startup video, and you can see there is some smoke that comes out of the exhaust. So you do see that the car might be having some issues with the valve seals drying up or oil getting pooled up in there. I don't know how often the car was run or maintained, oil changed, but you can see in this video that when it starts up, it does blow some smoke. So I don't know if that was really a big issue. I don't know if there was some oil seeping down through the valve seals and burning up on startup. Obviously they had to move the car to get it out, so it had run earlier that day. I don't know the details on the car. I don't know how often the oil was changed or how often it was started or brought up to operating temperature. It could be a car that just sat, and that's okay. This car is pristine. This is an example of a showpiece, museum piece, and it's never going to be a driver, so it really isn't anything to be worried about. I do see how people could be upset that it hasn't been driven and that this guy never had a chance to enjoy the car, but I also agree, like I said earlier, if you had other ones to enjoy, I don't think you really missed out on a whole lot. Now, people enjoy their cars in different ways, and that has to be respected. You have to realize that someone doesn't really care to go drive their car through the canyon to enjoy it. Some people don't have to drag race it to enjoy it. Some people love to just go out and look at it. Some people are car show people. They love to just take their car to the car show, try to get an award. Everybody enjoys it differently, so you can't tell somebody that they're not enjoying their car if it's sitting like this. I think the owner of this car walked out to it every day that they saw it and thought, wow, look at this, brand new, never used, still has all the stickers on it. And there are people, I have some good friends, who really geek out about this kind of stuff. And I like it too. I love to see the window sticker, the little foam pad there on the door, the plastic on the mirrors, how the car was shipped, the plastic on the seats and the steering wheel. If I could have bought a car brand new like this, I would have loved to have it non-dealer prepped, delivered to me, and I would have picked the car up, and of course I would have driven it, so I would have been the one to take off all the plastic and everything. Some people really like that. And so in this case, I don't think this car was abused. I think this car was preserved. There is another level of low mile cars though, like this Celine, for example, one of one competition orange. This is an actual Terminator Cobra Celine, and there were only a handful of these made, and as far as the orange one, like I said, one of one, they only made one. But this car doesn't have 0 miles on it or 5 miles on it. This has over 1,000 miles, but still not a ton. I think that's just enough miles to keep things moving, keep it running, and enjoy it a little bit. It was at car shows. I've seen pictures of it at car shows before. So this person does enjoy the car, and they get it out, and they drive it. Very similar in miles, we have this top picture of the 2003 Terminator Cobra with 1,500 original miles, original owner, which is interesting because when I went to make this video, right now the bid's at $61,450, and that's a great price for a car like this, and it's nice to see them bringing in that kind of money. But you look below and there's a turbo car with 9,000 miles on it. It's the exact same car, just 1,000 horsepower built up. 9,000 miles is still super low. So here we could get into the whole interesting topic of bone stock collectability, high price, and highly modified, but still bringing in some decent money. But without getting into that whole different topic, let's look at this Sonic Blue Terminator, 1,500 miles on it, beautiful car, original owner, very, very nice. And this car doesn't appear to have many issues. Now, I don't know if it's going to smoke on startup. I don't know if the seals are dried out. And that's the problem. People are all saying stuff like that. They're all talking about this car, and I think it's mostly jealousy. People are saying, oh, that car is trash, it's going to be all worn out, but you can look underneath, it doesn't look like it's leaking anything. But with 1,500 miles on it, it's been used enough that it's not just been sitting its whole life. I'm sure the owner enjoyed this car. I'm sure they've done a few nice pulls in the car, enjoyed hearing the supercharger scream. It's a really beautiful car, and it's an example of used but not abused. And it's also showing, like Carroll Shelby said, these cars were meant to be driven, so it hasn't been just parked and never used and never enjoyed and only looked at, depending on how you see things. But beautiful car. Now, it doesn't have all the plastic with it. They show that they have all these original certificates and brochures and things that come with the car, and that's pretty cool to see. I like to see that, but the engine bay is immaculate, and it looks like a really nice car, and I don't think it was abused. So let's talk about abused for a minute. And we'll start out with one of my favorite videos. I absolutely love the sound of the 4.6 liter Mustang. Whether it's a 2-valve or a 4-valve, they both sound amazing. This is one of the best sounding V8s. In my opinion, it is the best sounding V8 out there, and I love hearing it. Look how much fun you can have with a GT Mustang. This car sounds great, it's a lot of fun, you can do donuts, you can do all this stuff with it. So anyway, pay attention to that as we continue to watch one of my favorite videos. Now, I personally don't see this as total abuse. As long as the tires are spinning and he's keeping it under the red line, it's really not that bad. Now, it is a little bit violent, and second gear burnouts or whatever he's doing are pretty incredible, and they are a little hard on the car. Now, even though this is quite violent, it's not like he's doing long brake stands overpowering the rear brakes. He's not overheating the car, and he's not beating it off the rev limiter. This next video is one of my early favorites. Of course, there have been a lot of videos since this time, but this was one of the first Bullet Mustang videos out there. This car was still on its original set of tires. You can see that, judging by the video quality, that this was a long time ago. The car was new. But what I like about this video is he's out having fun, doing what these cars were made to do. They're made to have fun. You can do donuts, you can do burnouts, you can spin the tires and drift around a little bit, and I don't see that as really that abusive. Now, as long as you're not doing it for very, very long extended periods of time and hurting the car, damaging the engine, beating it off the rev limiter, like I said before, and we're going to get into some of those videos here coming up, but this is a video I watched a long time ago and I always liked it. 2001 Mustang Bullet, having a great time.
Got some rubber left on it. No sense in taking tires off if they're not completely shot. It's what I say. Might as well use it up. So let's use it up. James?
Awesome video. Of course, when I saw this, I wanted to bowl it so bad, and I saw this guy out there ripping on it. So a little bit abusive, couple brake stands, second gear, burnouts. Not too bad though on the car. He wasn't banging it off the rev limiter and stuff.
That's the damage.
That's
done.
used, baby. Used and abused.
So yeah, that guy was like used and abused, you know, he's more joking around, having a good time. I wouldn't call that too bad, but this next one here, this kid's at a burnout contest. He's doing a very long, several minute burnout with this car until he ultimately blows the tires, and he either blows the head gasket or overheats the car. Whatever he does, it makes coolant come out of the car. Probably messed up the engine pretty bad. He definitely gets the brakes hot enough that they catch on fire. Maybe there's brake fluid coming out of them. The rotors were probably burning hot because he doesn't have line lock. Most people don't have line lock on their cars. It's actually an option on some newer Mustangs, but anyway, what the line lock does is it holds the front wheels locked so that you can spin the rear wheels without having to overpower the brakes, because this whole time you can see his brake lights are on, the car is spinning the tires, and it's getting hot, and it's having to overpower the brakes the whole time. So here's a classic example of peer pressure. Burnout contest, everybody's cheering you on. You know, you destroy your own car and then they all give an applause and they all think you're cool. But now you have a messed up car to deal with. So I remember this video as total abuse. I saw this video and thought, man, that kid does not deserve that car. He's totally destroying that car, just abusing it, and that would constitute as abuse in my opinion. He hurt the car during all this. And so here you see the car limp away with flat tires, driving off, totally abused, leaking antifreeze. Really too bad to see somebody take it to that level. And I know they were just having fun. They didn't mean to do that to the car, but that's abuse. So this next example is one that I really remember when somebody asks me about what's the difference between having fun with a car and abusing a car. This one is definitely abusing a car. This guy goes for city blocks, doing a burnout the whole time. You can see his brake lights are on. He's overpowering the brakes, doing like a brake stand basically, but a rolling brake stand as he goes through here and just burns the tires off this GT. Now, what I found out later is the story behind this is the guy bought the car and then he didn't want it anymore, changed his mind, and so he went out and destroyed it and then tried to give it back as a broken car, or he tried to claim some kind of insurance on it, and he got busted because this video was out there of him doing this to the car, proving that he was out there, you know, ruining this car. But watching this video was obviously cool to see a Mustang doing this. These cars were really new at this time, so it was fun to see what they were capable of, you know, and he's out there swinging donuts. But you can see the car is totally capable of going out there and having a lot of fun with it. But he was just over abusive with this thing, just really long time spinning the tires. And you can see here he'll get going and he even whacks it into the curb. And when he does, he totally breaks the wheel, and you'll see a close-up of that here in a second. But just doing this long burnouts and just beating and abusing the car. I'm sure he wasn't even paying attention to the coolant temperature or anything. And here you see him swinging around. It's quite impressive how much abuse this GT could actually take going out and doing this for minutes on end. And you know, here you see him whack the curb, and he's going to hit it pretty hard here. Boom, and they do it in slow motion. Here it comes around. Boom, just enough to destroy the wheel. And he's still doing it, and now he's getting into the e-brake turns. And, you know, the poor car is just really getting abused at this point. So, long-standing burnouts again. He just kept going, and who knows how long he actually did this, because the video has some edits in it. And he just keeps on being abusive to it. Before I knew what he was really trying to do to the car, I was just under the impression that he was out there enjoying his car and really hammering on it. But I guess he had alternative motives, according to what I've read about this and seen in comments and stuff. But just over and over and over and over. And you know, for the most part, the car can handle it. It's not banging off the rev limiter like I said, you know, but it's just really hard to do all at once. I mean, if you did this, you know, over a period of time and let the car cool down, it probably wouldn't be so bad, but he's just destroying it until finally, here you can see he's laughing about it. It gets to the point where the tires are completely bald, the wheels busted on the back, and then he opens up the hood and it's just steaming. There's coolant on the ground. He's overheated the engine, probably warped a cylinder head and messed up this car. So it's really too bad. I don't know him, and I'm not going to make any judgment calls against him. Obviously, it kind of speaks for itself, but it's really sad that he had the dealership right there on the front of the car. From what I understand, that's what got him in big trouble. He was showing off what he was doing, and he was putting this video out there, and the attorneys got a hold of it, from what I understand. But that is abuse to a nice Mustang. It's really sad to see. And you can watch the Mustang Week videos where they have the burnout contests, and they are really beaten on these cars, and to the point where they actually rip the treads apart and they slap the back bumper and even rip the bumpers apart. You can see this guy's damaged the car, and that wasn't intentional, but that is something that happened. And so you watch those Mustang Week videos. I've seen them where they just rip the whole back bumper of the car when the tires exploded, because they get cheap old tires to do the burnout contest with, but it ends up hurting the car. Now, I did a video about Tanner's Terminator Cobra. Tanner is a great driver. He really is, and he's in there doing a lot with the car right now, and you can see him competing and doing this awesome launch with the car, and the car has put up with a lot of abuse. Now, I've done a story about this car, and I mentioned before that it did bother me how much he beat this off the rev limiter. You know, he'd run it really hard and over rev it in each gear, and it would beat off the limiter, and that was hard to watch. I saw that as more abusive than anything, like in this video. And you can hear he's holding it on the two-step. Like my friend Mike's Garage, he has a great YouTube channel. He rebuilt the engine on his Mach 1, and he was talking about this, that when you have a car and you're holding it on the two-step like that with boost and everything, you are potentially bending the pins and the timing guides. Everything in the timing system is just chattering, and the harmonics could even crack an oil pump gear. So you can see in this video, this is what I see as abusive. You can hear all that popping as the engine's trying to limit what they're doing to the car, and it's just abusive, and he keeps going with it, keeps going with it. And you know, I'm not saying anything bad about Tanner. I already said he's a great guy, great driver, everything about that. So, but to me, I hated seeing that. I was like, oh, stop doing that, it's so abusive. But he does do some really clean racing, and you know, he does clean burnouts, and he races down the track, and that's fine. And so you'll see in these next couple videos, he runs down the track just fine, but then the in-car video of the rev limiter is what bugs me.
Virgin, get her, take off.
And more peer pressure and abuse at Mustang Week with his friends Cobra.
Let's go, Aaron!
I see all those fast revs of the throttle as abusive, and you'll see it here from the inside even better.
It's
So you can see that was total abuse. That I don't like to see. But on the other hand, getting back away from the abuse and back towards how you can enjoy these cars without destroying them is Stick Shift Dude. This is one of my favorite guys, Jeff Smith. One of the coolest racers out there. He's won a lot of really cool awards, the Tremec shootouts and stuff. And he had this Terminator Cobra that he bought, low mileage, and he just started racing it. And the original engine on this car lasted over 5,000 passes. I talked to him about the car and he told me that he had the engine removed and built up, but it wasn't because he hurt the engine. It's just because he wanted to do different things and go a different route with the car. But this is an example of a clean pass, clean burnouts, not banging it off the rev limiter, launching the car right, still on the IRS, the independent rear suspension. This is an example of enjoying a car and racing it without abusing it. So I can see this as used but not abused.
Alright, Supra and the Cobra.
See, there you go, deep into the 9-second range, 150 mile an hour trap. I mean, and I know guys are doing even more than that, and you can just take that car out, you can drive it around town, still a street car, it's not all hacked up and cut into pieces to be a drag car. That's a whole nother topic on itself, but it's really cool to see a totally capable car that's been taken care of. It's still really good looking, and it's not abused mechanically or physically on the outside. So now people say, now Justin, you had that whole series on your Bullet, you've done tons of burnouts, you've done things like that, and that's true. I feel like the way I treated my car was not abusive. It was fun, it was what the car was made for, but it wasn't abusive like these videos of my Bullet. So I think it's perfectly fine to go have fun with the car. It's fun to do some burnouts. It's fun to race them. It's fun to do a lot of things with these cars that technically isn't abusing them. It's using them for what they're made for. They are an American icon. They are made for this. This is what people want to do with this car. This is why you want a V8, not just to look at it, but to have fun with it. And you know, I'm okay with looking at the cars too, and sometimes I go out to go for a drive and I just kind of want to hang out in the garage and look at the cars, and really, when you go for a drive, it's the other people who are getting the most enjoyment out of seeing your car from the outside, seeing how it sounds and what it looks like, and you're in it enjoying that part of the experience. But sometimes I like to go out and experience my cars seeing them, or take them somewhere where I can pull out a camp chair, sit back, look at the car, enjoy. So there's a lot of aspects to this, and there's a lot of opinions of what people think, but to me, don't abuse the car, don't beat it off the rev limiter, don't overheat it, don't hurt the engine, don't overpower the brakes to the point where you're burning the rotors and, you know, lighting them up red hot. You know, I think there is a difference. And to the people who see a car that gets destroyed and they say, well, they were meant to be driven, that's not what it means. They weren't meant to be destroyed. They were meant to be driven and enjoyed, and that's my opinion. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun with it. Stay tuned for more Mustang content.